Those of you who have seen the classic movie Back to the Future 2 will definitely remember the scene where Marty comes across the incredibly futuristic gadget known as self-lacing shoes, and Nike decided to create that into a reality, and these are the Nike Adapt BB shoes, which indeed have self-lacing and unlacing motors inside. So we're gonna talk about how these kind of work, the specs, and of course we're gonna try them on. That's what this video is about. Now, the BB part of the name of these shoes stands for basketball, so these are mostly intended to be basketball shoes, so they have that kind of style with the sort of high top, although not ridiculously a high top like you might see in other shoes, and they do have a distinctive style. It looks pretty futuristic and also unusual, obviously because there are no laces. It almost kind of looks like they could be slippers, but that's maybe why they slapped that giant Nike logo on the side of it, so you don't think that walking around. And I do actually kind of like this style. Even though it is a bit unusual, it does look like they could pass as regular sneakers, not just necessarily as basketball shoes, so they're pretty cool in my opinion. It's obviously gonna come down to preference. Clearly, because there are no laces, the only way to tighten and loosen this thing is through the motor, and you can control that one of two ways. One through the buttons on the side, and the other with the app that we're gonna mention in a little bit. So the buttons on the side, there's only two of them, a forward and reverse button. The forward button will tighten the shoes, and the reverse button will loosen them. But before we get to that, let's first go over the specs, and then we can try them on and talk about all that sort of stuff. Considering how much technology and with the motor and the battery all packed in this thing, it actually is surprisingly normal weight. It seems like it's not any heavier than any other type of large sneaker. Definitely lighter than boots, but definitely heavier than maybe the Nike Airs that I wear typically sometimes. But it's in a happy medium, and when you're wearing it, it definitely does not feel heavy like you're wearing a lead boot or anything like that. Now, the wiring system that laces these up is actually pretty strong. The motor is capable of pulling on 32 pounds of force and then holding it, of course. So that is believable when you put it on. It does get really tight. And the battery is about 505 milliamp hours, which is a little bit bigger than I expected. To put that into perspective, an iPhone XS has a battery of about 2600 milliamp hours. So considering this is just a motor and that's all it is, it seems like a pretty good battery size. Apparently it lasts about 10 to 14 days, at least on a single charge, which is great. As for the price, they come in at a whopping $350. So definitely not cheap, but they could be a lot more expensive considering how much research and development must have gone into these. So I think this is actually a pretty fair price point for what these are. And I would definitely not think that these are gonna be made for the average person, not at all. Maybe for shoe heads who just love having all sorts of shoes, they wanna show them off, or they're just into collecting it, that sort of thing. And if you are that type of person, then $350 is definitely affordable compared to some ridiculously expensive designer shoes. I think it's actually a pretty good price for what it is again. Though believe it or not, these are not actually the very first self-lacing automatic shoes that were released by Nike. A few years ago, they created the Hyper Adapt 1.0, and those things costed $720. So for the price of this one, it's come down quite a bit, and they've improved as well. Now, as for how to get your hands on these, the release date seems kind of weird. So I pre-ordered it when they had a pre-order page right after they made the press release, but they took that page down shortly after I pre-ordered it, and they still sent it to me actually a little bit early, because after they took down the pre-order page, they put up a message that said you'll be able to buy it on the 17th. There is no more option to pre-order, and I got this on the 14th, so I don't know how hard it's gonna get on the official release date of the 17th. I pre-ordered this just like anyone else could have. I didn't like pull any strings to get it early. So I don't know what the deal is. Apparently the official release date is the 17th. But anyway, enough talk. Let's show you what these things look like when you try them on, the fun part. So basically all you have to do to tighten these is you put them on, and then it detects that you put your foot in, and it will automatically pre-tighten them to a pre-programmed fit. So you don't have to do anything. Of course, you can adjust it afterwards. And the first thing I would say is that these things are louder than you'd probably expect. I would actually say they are comically loud. Like, you could easily hear these clear across the house. So I don't really know how practical these would be in real life. if you're taking them on and off in the comfort of your own home, obviously you're not gonna really bother anyone, but if you're at the basketball court putting these on, people might stare at you a little bit. That being said though, they might require that kind of loud motor because they do get very, very tight, obviously. Like I said, 32 pounds of force. When you put this thing on maximum tightness, those shoes are not coming off. Believe me, they grip it very strongly. So after you put it in and it has the default tightness, you can tighten it or loosen it using the forward and backwards button respectively. And then if you want, you can also save the strength a default and change it to your custom one by holding both buttons at the same time, and then it will save that. And I will say that it's much easier and more practical to tighten and loosen it and set the tightness with the app, but we'll get to that in a bit. When you do end up wanting to take the shoes off to loosen them all the way, you can just hold down the back button for like a second and a half, and then it will automatically unloosen it completely, and you'll kind of hear it change the tone of the motor, and it'll go a lot faster. All right, so now on to controlling this with the app. First of all, I want to say that Nike did this app really well. It feels very, very polished. You know, sometimes you use apps made by companies, especially if it's the first version, they feel very janky, it lags, doesn't respond. This feels like a very well-made app, at least the iPhone version. The only slight trouble I had was initially connecting the shoes. It connects with Bluetooth. Basically, you start the setup process and then it tells you to hold the phone next to the buttons on the left shoe and then the right shoe, and then it tries to auto detect them. I was having some trouble with it detecting one shoe or the other, so I did end up just kind of restarting the app a couple times by closing it out, swiping it away, and then restarting it. And after about 2 times of doing that, it did connect to both of them. And then once it was connected, had no issues whatsoever, even automatically reconnecting when you start the app again, that sort of thing. It works great. After you do get both of them connected, you can then choose your lacing strength by simply sliding up or down the left and R letters. It's kind of a cool interface, I do like it. And on Max, if you want it to be even stronger than the maximum, they have this ultimate lockdown mode. So you swipe it all the way to the top, and then you can keep swiping the letter up past the maximum, and each time it'll tighten it a little bit more and more, so you can get it extremely tight. Although I don't know how much that's gonna affect the motor performance or what, but it's possible. And I think you can see how it is a lot easier to get the tightness of the app. You get these little notches so you know exactly how tight it is, as opposed to just kind of pressing the buttons on the side and guessing. Some other features on the app include a button to unlace both shoes at the same time. That's the one all the way on the right. You can change the colors of the side buttons, so you get a bunch of different color options there, or you can just have it off. And then there's a button to see the battery percentages of both the shoes as well. And because these shoes basically have a computer built in with Bluetooth, you can actually update the software of the shoes, and it'll prompt you when there's a new version. I don't really know what kind of software updates a shoe can get, but they have them, and it actually did give me a software update when I bought the shoes, so I'm kind of curious what that changed, but there you go. Now you might be wondering how these shoes charge. They do actually come with a charging mat. So the charging mat is called the Nike Adapt Charger 1.0, and I find it is a very good size. It's just big enough, same profile as the shoe, so anywhere you would be able to fit putting the shoes, you'll be able to fit this charging mat. And then it's just regular QI charging, so look, you can even put a regular phone down on it and it'll start charging that if you wanted to. Probably not as fast as an actual phone charger, but who knows? And it is a regular Type-C connector with USB power, so you can use the USB to AC adapter that comes with it, or if you just have a bunch lying around the house, you want to use a longer wire or something like that, you can use your own. Like I mentioned before, the battery is going to last supposedly 10 to 14 days on a single charge, and if you do get down to a critical battery level, it'll show red for the buttons on the side. Red color means critical battery, and in that case, it's in loosen only mode, so you can't change the tightness unless you're basically unlacing it completely. So that kind of gives you a buffer zone where if the battery's about to run out, you'll always be able to at least take your feet out of it by unlacing it, but you won't be able to tighten it anymore until you charge it again. So with all these electronics and batteries and all that inside the shoe, you might be wondering, how long is this thing gonna last? Is it actually durable? And actually, Nike did put an infographic on their product page showing what kind of testing testing these things go through, so I assume that it's able to withstand these tests. And some examples include dumping 80 gallons of water on it in 3 minutes. So that's about half a gallon per second, which I think that would answer any questions about how waterproof it is. Definitely so. It's been tested with 40,000 button presses. I don't think you're ever gonna press more than that in the lifetime of the shoe. And it can survive like 30,000 impacts at 780 pounds of force. Not bad, I guess. And it also says here it'll last through continuously 2,900 tightening and loosening cycles. So if we kind of calculate and say you take it on and off twice a day, then these shoes would last about 4 years. And I think if you're gonna be using running shoes and athletic shoes that often, then that might be how long a typical shoe is gonna last anyway. Of course, I do expect it'll probably last longer than that because it's not like you're gonna be tightening it all the way every time like they might have done these tests. And it also says here it'll go through about 300 miles of running, and from what I've looked up, that is pretty typical for running shoes. So it does seem like these shoes are just as durable as high quality athletic shoes of any other kind, and that's more impressive, I think, considering that there are so many electronics in here and moving parts that could potentially break down, and they seem to keep working. And I do believe Nike said in some interview that they want the actual components inside to outlast the life of the rubber and shoe itself. Now, I know a lot of you are gonna want me to answer the question, are these shoes worth it? And that's definitely gonna depend. Most people, I think, are definitely not gonna need to buy this. Obviously, it's not very hard to lace your shoes, so if you're just buying it so you don't have to lace your shoes, that's a bit ridiculous. I don't think I would call it a gimmick though, because you can actually use these shoes, they're high quality, in like a professional setting. If you wanted to play basketball with these, you can do it. So I don't think I would call it a gimmick. Definitely more of like a novelty type thing though, and I think mostly collectors are gonna buy this. But if you are someone who is like really into basketball, really into tech, you might want to buy this and show it off. And I definitely would consider these maybe a step above a proof of concept. So obviously they're not very practical, but they are cool and they do work. So if you really want them, go out and buy them, who knows. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed these videos. If you want to check out some other ones I have on here, you can just click on those. So let me know what you think down in the comments. Would you buy these shoes? We can talk about that down there. And until next time, guys, be seeing you.